Sports rights coming back to caller stations is a hot topic. We got some of the biggest players who are doing it up on the stage with us. And so joining me today are Pat LaPlatney, President and Co-CEO, Gray Television, Frank Siecha, Rick Young, SVP, Head of Global Products for LTN, Brian Lawler, President, Scripps Sports, and Scott Shapiro, EVP Corporate Development for Sinclair. There you go, first shout out. Anyway, we'll hop right into it with Brian. Where do you see the industry and the overall trajectory of local broadcasters reclaiming sports rights? Is it early stages today or the late innings?
Definitely not the late innings. Second inning, it feels like it's still very early. We are 2 years into probably our deal with the WNBA, our deal with the Vegas Golden Knights here, and those were some of the first deals brought back to over-the-air broadcast. So I still think it's really early. I think a lot of the teams that have been with RSNs for decades are sort of looking at the landscape, trying to figure out, is over-the-air a good platform for them? The reach is good. The money, it depends, since it's more of an ad-based model versus a distribution model. Also, I think we're in the really early stages with the distributors, trying to get them to understand our new business model and that, broadcasters are going to be part of sports rights moving forward. But I think they're still fighting that and getting their heads around that. So my belief is maybe we're in the second inning. We've played the first. We've got a foundation. Maybe we got an early lead, but there's a lot of the game still to be played.
Okay, fair enough. Pat, we were just talking about some of your latest deals. Where do you see it stand?
Yeah, I would say it's like top of the third, right? Maybe we're off to a really good start. And by the way, I didn't go Hollywood on you guys. I have some sort of light sensitive eyes, so apologies for that. But I do think there's a long way to go. There are a number of deals out there that sort of bigger, broader deals that haven't happened yet. And I think, I do think that this broadcast / DTC construct that's emerging is something that's sustainable.
Okay, fair enough. Scott, what do you think? Obviously, a lot of experience in local sports rights, and where do you see it now with the call letter trend? Call letter trend.
I don't want anybody to tiptoe around RSNs just because I'm here. So
no, that was in my intro. I had something about shake up or something, but yeah.
I mean, I agree. Second, third inning, the eyeballs are definitely ahead of monetization in terms of figuring that whole component out. And you're still seeing a pretty wide disparity of what teams are interested in, what the leagues might be interested in. Even like the geographic footprint can be interesting for a broadcaster to put together. Now we're seeing packages of games come out, which is a new development, and how to clear those in a way that makes economic sense. So it's a lot of like potential transactions flying around. So it definitely feels early and lots of opportunity and lots of risk, obviously. So I think we're all trying to figure out the right balance.
Right. Yeah. And the cost-benefit analysis you guys do, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Frank, you want to weigh in?
It was interesting because a lot of the deals that got done, at least the ones that we were involved with, had to do with the fact that the seasons were about to start. A lot of stuff happened really late, I think, and I think that's part of what puts everything in the second inning or top of the third is that a lot of the deals are shorter term, so we have a lot to learn, not only about what we're doing right now, but where this is all going to go. When these deals come up, because it's going to be quick.
I guess I'll throw this question to Brian first. How has sports performed from a ratings perspective compared to the programming it replaced? And what's been the response from advertisers?
Well, I think from a programming perspective, one of the reasons why we got into sports and doubled down on it was because it drives some of the largest viewing of any genre. We've all seen the numbers, right? 2 years ago, 96 out of the top 100 shows on TV were live sports, and that plays itself out in local sports too. Last year in Las Vegas, after we put the Golden Knights here on over-the-air broadcast, 43 of the top 100 shows in Las Vegas last year were live Vegas Golden Knights games. So we were able to double their rating from when they were at the RSN the year before. This year with the Florida Panthers, we're up 130%. So, I think our thesis that, when you go and, put them on over-the-air broadcast and our stations are fully distributed, that there's a lot more opportunity for eyeballs. And obviously advertisers are quick to follow. It's rare that they can find that level of audience and the fact that people watch sports live. It's not time shifted, so it's great call to action, weekend sales, things like that. So we've seen a lot of success. And for us, a lot of these dollars, most of them are new dollars. They're not our regular advertisers, and if they are, they spend in sports at levels completely different than what they do when they're, just sort of, putting together flight-based buys. So it's a very different advertiser experience.
Okay, fair enough. Pat, how has sports performed for Gray stations?
Yeah, the answer is great, and I agree with everything Brian said. In terms of time period performance, it's it's just multiples. It's 3x, 4x, 5x. Recently we did the first Atlanta Braves game, so we did opening day. It was on the road, and the rating for that game in Atlanta was literally 10x the time period. And what's interesting is, I'll stay on the Braves for a second. It's not just Atlanta. I mean, we have 24 markets that carry the Braves games, and there are real numbers in every market. And so the benefit to the team is not simply in the home market. It's this large geography where there's a whole lot of people watching their product. But in terms of time period comparisons, there's really no comparison. I mean, it's sports and news, the only two things people watch live really anymore. And so it's making a difference.
Okay, fair enough. I want to turn to Rick. What has been the impact on LTN's business of local sports? Coming back to the stations, how are you participating in that, and how is that creating maybe new revenues for you?
Well, all this talk about, what inning we're in, I would argue that LTN's sort of been with local broadcasters since spring training, if you will, right? Since the early, not the earliest days of broadcast, of course, but for many, many years. I think we're lucky enough to work with every group up here. On the news side, on the sports side, we do a ton of next generation ATSC3 work with the broadcast groups. So we're really deeply embedded in local broadcast and have sort of made a significant investment. Specific to this we also work with the RSNs as well. We work with some of the streaming platforms, but on the broadcast side, it's been, nobody really cares, but it's been a great opportunity for LTN. We've worked with some broadcast groups to do live master control services around exactly this model. Pat mentioned that, I can't remember, 20 some markets get the Braves, Scripps stations get the we can build those networks that connect sort of the main market, the Atlanta market, with the 24 other markets that they're serviced. We do that for another broadcast group for both NHL games and MLB games. Of course, we've been doing distribution of content into broadcast stations for many, many years, D2 channels, et cetera, backhauling ABC affiliates to ABC. I mean, we do a ton of different use cases. The sports thing is really, really valuable in the LTN world. LTN was built for live and real-time video. We have this global network. I'm not going to get too technical in this audience, but we've built a global network that allows us to manage live and real-time content and enrich it in unique ways as it traverses our network, which I think has a lot of applicability, and maybe we can talk about it more later, in terms of local sports, live sports, customization.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask Brian about the viewership. Does the viewership for Major League Sports on local ATA, does it look different on a demographic basis than what the viewership was for RSNs? And what are the teams telling you?
Yeah, I don't know how different it is. Look, fans are fans, right? And so, you have a lot that were with the RSN because they were pretty loyal. I think what we're finding as you're putting them on air, on over-the-air broadcast is you have a lot more people who, through searchability, are able to stumble onto them. And I think it's, attracting a different fan. I'll flip it a little bit, like, with the WNBA, we have the Friday night rights we own ION. And so we acquired the rights to every Friday night game in the WNBA, and we have national games, and then we can also regionalize games. But in that case, the profile of what the WNBA has brought to ION is a totally different audience, and what we brought to the WNBA is a totally different audience. So ION would traditionally be in, a older skewing female-based audience, and that's an appealing audience to the WNBA because those, that wouldn't be their typical audience. And so we've brought a lot more female viewership and identity to the W. And at the same time, having the WNBA on ION has made us younger, has made us more diverse, and has brought a more balanced male-female skew. So I think it's sort of a benefit that we can attract new viewers by having it, but also we can bring new fans to teams and leagues.
Pat, what have you seen in terms of viewership? And maybe compare it to the viewership of what you had before, the programming that the sports replaced.
Right, so that look, there's no comparison between what we had in there and what the sports, with the exception in Phoenix, where those games frequently are on KTVK, which is a very strong independent, but for the most part, on the DigiNets and on, for instance, Peachtree TV in Atlanta, the numbers are huge compared to what we had in there. I would say, if you look at the demographic skew between the RSNs, and we have limited data on RSNs, right? And broadcast, I don't think there's a big difference there. I would note that on the WNBA franchises that we work with, there's been some significant growth there, right, overall. And you might think that, that's driven by women. In fact, what we're seeing, again, in a very limited universe, is that the growth in males, so let's take, men 25 to 54, is essentially double what the growth has been for women 25 to 54. So it seems like there's a lot of men out there that are beginning to appreciate the women's game. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well,
May I ask a follow-up? Sorry, no, it's your panel. No, it's your
I
panel.
want you to weigh in, Rick. That's why you're in the center.
I'm in the middle, so.
You got a correspondent now.
You're like Paul Lynn, you're the center square. That's great.
I don't even know where to go with that one. There's a Paul Lynn fan club out there, somebody.
Vegas, probably.
Well, I guess we do a lot of, it's true, we do a lot of work with broadcast stations, helping them drive local news content to streaming platforms to chase what is believed to be a younger audience on those platforms, and I think that's pretty well established. But where is and I guess my hypothesis, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, is sort of where's the cross promotion? Is doing local sports helping local news bring new audiences to local news and vice versa, right? I feel like there's a really good potential virtuous circle there.
So I'll take a crack at that. I think the answer is yes, you're getting new viewership into your news product. I think one point that I failed to make when Brian was talking earlier, so on ad sales, you get these big sort of packages, right? So these big sort of commitments, season-long commitments. What we've seen in a couple of our markets are new advertisers that are heavy in sports, but those guys are branching out to buy our other day parts, which is a really good thing, right? At the end of the day, you're getting these new advertisers who say, oh, I'll buy the news now. I'm in the Suns, and I'll go over there and buy your news and Wheel and Jeff or whatever else it is. So there's this sort of halo effect, not only from a programming and audience perspective, but also from an ad sales perspective.
I wanted to jump in on the ratings, because I do know a lot about RSN ratings. I am impressed with the younger skew of broadcast. We have 2 full seasons. We just did the Seattle Storm deal for this coming season, so that'll be really interesting to see. But first of all, there's 20% of this now OTA viewership versus 0 for an RSN. And it's definitely spiked the rating younger, 25 to 54, which for an RSN would be, depending on the team, unusual to have, it's definitely a 55 plus rating. So totally agree also on the news that Pat just mentioned. We've appended our local news product and personnel and to the teams that we have rights for. I think that's been a great synergy. They definitely sell, a package. I guess it remains to be seen over the long term how much it drives a news rating increase and news revenue increase, but it is definitely one of those halo impacts that's hard to quantify, but I think very critical to understanding how beneficial professional sports could be for local TV news.
Frank, how much of a play is there for the Fox-owned stations in securing these local sport rights? I mean, I wouldn't think you'd be in a hurry to replace core network programming, but you've been active in this space too.
Yeah, again, we've picked and choose our spots. When opportunities come up, we've tried to do our best. We've got a couple NHL teams now, 4 baseball teams, which we're happy about. And it's a balance because, we don't want to preempt the network much, although we do in some cases, if it makes sense. We certainly don't want to infringe on any of the national sports packages that the company has, because some of them actually have deal points where they have to run on the Fox station. There's we can't, play there in a lot of cases. So, the 50, 60, 70 game packages, that might be more difficult for us to do, but we have one in Los Angeles, and it's on the duopoly, and I think that's worked well for us. What I'm encouraged about is, we've worked well with our network. We've got, all of our stuff placed, but if I look back a year ago, 4/5 of what we have going now didn't exist. So I'm really happy about that.
Thanks. Scott and I were talking on our prep call about how many different platforms there are to watch local sports now, and I think you came up with 7 between OTA and RSN and national network broadcast, national network cable, virtual MVPDs, all that. Obviously, what you're competing against, all local stations are competing against, is increased competition from streamers, across your whole business. So, is there a streaming component with any of the deals that you've done for local sports rights, or is that something that you're leaving to the teams?
I'd say this is one of these that I'm still noodling on. At Diamond, we were, I think, very invested in building a very comprehensive streaming product. From a broadcast perspective, I think we've really kind of listened to the teams and tried to understand what their desires were before we went and did anything from a streaming perspective. I do believe, the bigger a streaming product is, the better, just in terms of reach, et cetera. But I think it's to be determined. I would like to see all the avails sort of together and be able to attack like we would our broadcast station, with streaming and linear. Our deals to date have been sort of ceding digital to the team, which was an important deal point for those counterparts. But even in recent conversations, it seems that that's morphing, and maybe the teams are thinking differently about it too. But I do think there's a ton of utility, just like anything else, in terms of keeping those, one sales force, one team, one content engine, et cetera. So to be determined. But I know my, fellow broadcasters they've done different things, even across our broadcast, station. There's just different strategies with streaming everywhere.
Yeah, look, I think we have a different opinion. I think we feel really strongly about the complement of linear and streaming. And so here in Las Vegas, where we have the linear rights to the Golden Knights, in Florida, where we have the linear rights to the Florida Panthers, we've actually partnered with the teams to stand up a streaming product that complements our linear assets. And so, in the NHL, you get about 70 games that you can broadcast locally. So we produce all those games, we put them on over-the-air television, and then we also stream those on a direct-to-consumer team-branded app that is paid for. So in both cases, we sold that for $69.99 for the season. And so it's a hell of a deal. It's like $1 a game. But what it does is, the reason why these teams are partnering with us isn't because we're throwing a lot more money at them. In many cases, we're throwing less money at them. It's all about reach, right? And they want to put their games in front of as many fans as possible. And that means, building fandom. It means putting more butts in the seats. It means selling more merch. And so, here in Las Vegas, if you think about it, we're in the Pacific time zone. So anytime the Golden Knights head east and they're playing down in Tampa or Florida, they're playing the Rangers, the Islanders, Boston, whatever, a 7 o'clock East Coast game is a 4 o'clock game here in Vegas. There's only so many people who can be home in front of a linear, in front of a physical television at 4 o'clock. But for us to be able to make available a season-wide package for $70 that allows you to watch every game live on a phone or on a tablet, suddenly you're at work and you got a big game against the Rangers, you kind of throw that on the side of your desk, and now you have complete engagement. And maybe while you're working, you got your eye on the phone and you catch the first 2 periods. Well, now you're in, right? You get in the car and drive home, you listen to the game on the radio, you walk in the house, you put the game on TV for the 3rd period, and that's the proposition. So it's a paid app. We sell a different ad stream in that versus the linear ad stream. So it's additional revenue. It's done incredibly well, really good engagement. But we think, again, if our proposition is we want to make games available anywhere, on any platform, on any device in the market so that your fans get to see your games, we think adding digital and streaming to linear is a great complement. And to us, it's worked really well.
And are those deals geo-fenced?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah, not just in the market, but to their whole territory. So, like here in Vegas, it's not just Las Vegas, it's all in Nevada. Their territory includes Arizona, Montana, Idaho. So there's 6 or 7 states that you can purchase and be able to watch all of the Golden Knights games.
Okay. Pat, how has Gray approached streaming?
Yeah, so if Scott was on one poll and Brian was on the other, we're probably a little closer to Scott's poll than Brian's. Thank you, Brian. So what, we try to work collaboratively with the teams and kind of figure out what their goals are. And, but the one point that Scott made that you may not have picked up on was that, you really need to work together with the team in terms of how ad sales works, right? Because you don't want to be stepping on each other if they're handling streaming and you're doing broadcast. So we make sure that that's well coordinated in any of the streaming deals that we're involved with.
Right. And probably your first concern is you don't want to cannibalize your OTA product either.
Yeah, I think they're generally different audiences, not completely different, but mostly different.
Okay, fair enough.
What we're hearing is sort of exactly represented in the market, on this panel, is more and more we're being asked when we manage live sports on OTA for broadcasters, but also for streaming platforms, is to put new ads or ads themselves into the linear product, sort of the main game to the main platform, but also enable it with the appropriate signaling, the appropriate SCUDdy triggers, what have you, for streaming platforms. So you get the both model that you're talking about. And sort of the magic is, when it comes to technology and automation and efficiency, is to be able to do it once, right? Get those spots in there that you need to sell for over the air, but also enable it if you want to do a deal that's a streaming deal on that exact same game. So you need the appropriate sort of signaling infrastructure in place to process it once, but deliver it 2 times, 3 times, 100 times to different places with different business models. We sort of have been forced to respect, in a good way, forced to respect all business models, because you can hear it represented on this panel.
Could I toot your horn a little bit? One thing that's
Please.
unique about what LTN has done for us, and we've a long time customer for our multicast networks and now our sports initiatives. One thing we never did as an RSN, excuse me, was we had one ad zone. We had our network wherever it was, And it wasn't economically viable to create another zone because we were using satellites, and satellites are very expensive. When we set up the Portland Trailblazers, now we're able to use LTN, and we have multiple ad zones. We have a Seattle ad zone. We run a Southern Oregon ad zone, and so we have incremental inventory we would never have that local sales forces can sell that aren't in Portland proper, and so it's completely accretive to us to have just new inventory that didn't exist before. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's a concept. I mean, obviously, the reason we're having this panel is because of the shakeup in the RSNs, but now we have broadcast RSNs, and you just
We don't use that word. But
I think Pat said he doesn't use that word either.
Too soon, too soon.
We call them BSNs. No offense, Scott.
No, I like it.
Broadcast sports networks.
But can you explain to our audience a little bit how that works for Gray in terms of sticks, and perhaps you're doing the same thing with advertising that Scott mentioned?
Yeah, so from a distribution perspective, we have, there's 11 of these broadcast sports networks. Let's use the Georgia Peachtree, PSN Peachtree Sports Network. So, it's laying out all the markets in Georgia. And the way we're architected for sales is you can sell the whole state, or you can sell market by market, right? So it's not really zoned, but I mean, it is, you can sell locally and sell the network if you want to. From a programming perspective, and the whole sort of philosophy about launching these BSNs is, hey, it'd be good use of our digital spectrum, our diginets. But we saw an opportunity with some of the higher profile sports franchises a couple of years ago. We decided to start rolling this out. And so you've got sort of, pro sports at the top, right? WNBA, NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey. And then there's the next level is sort of more local sort of minor league stuff, right? So minor league hockey, minor league baseball, maybe a lacrosse team, USL soccer, and then there's the collegiate stuff below that, and there's high school below that. So there's a lot of product out there, and then we have archives of both Raycom Sports, and a little production company we own in Nashville called Power Nation. That's really automotive enthusiast programming. It kind of fills in the gaps around that. So we've got a lot of sort of, I hate to use the word, but I'll use it, filler programming around those live sports, and we're really happy with the results so far.
We call it shoulder programming.
Shoulder's a good one.
Sounds better. How much of that are you doing, Scott? You do have a couple 24/7 operations, right, as part of this?
Well, we have actually a very robust high school football. Steve is right there, who heads it, and we've been doing that for a long time. So we would definitely call it shoulder programming in the sense that it's already there and available. Now, in our markets where we've launched 24/7, whether it's Rip City Network in Portland or in Salt Lake City, which was an existing independent, we've done a few things to sort of buttress the programming. First and foremost, we've put some news on. We call it ARC. It's more lifestyle as opposed to your traditional local sports, and we've run that in Portland. In Salt Lake City, we certainly leverage our news department for sports specials and things like that. But there are existing other local sports. Like I know we've grabbed some minor league baseball in Portland and a few other things that make a ton of sense. In Seattle now, we've got the WNBA, so we've got another product there that we can marry with Trailblazers that we're carrying. So we've definitely leaned towards making it more of a sports-centric location, again, with some lifestyle news as well.
Okay, thanks. The thing which everyone stated with sports going to OTA compared to an RSN, you're broadening the reach. What's the payoff been for the teams, I guess, in terms of either improved ticket sales or merchandise sales? I mean, Frank, in the markets where you've done it, what are the teams saying about the impact on that side of the business for them?
In a meeting we had last week down in Anaheim, the team president there could not have been happier with the deal so far. And we were sitting in a packed building with a line outside the merch store, and he just was beaming about it and was very happy that we have 2 more years of the arrangement. So I would think that would be part of anybody's play in coming to broadcast at this point.
Sometimes I felt like we were competing with the teams when we were a platform of regional sports networks. I think it's totally opposite as a broadcaster. It's really, we just open it up and say, how do you want your brand represented? Portland branded their network in Portland. They're incredibly appreciative to be representing their brand, market their brand however they want to do it. And frankly, as a broadcaster in the market, we're probably much better served sourcing viewers, leveraging the power of their brands than trying to come up with something new, right? So we've gone like 180 in terms of instead of trying to build a national regional sports network, we're really letting the teams have like an incredible amount of, I wouldn't say control is not the right word, but they certainly, it's their brand being represented, and they're playing a heavy role in determining how that comes to market. So they're very happy.
And there's going to be room for more opportunity. I mean, sort of indirectly from the one deal we did with the Anaheim Ducks, we now have 12 Angels games because of similar contacts and such. And the question was, well, what if it ends up being more? And this is like the team asking that. And we said, bring it on. Bring it on. And I think they're gonna love what happens when they see the audience they get. And I expect that there will be more, if not this year, then maybe next year.
Fair enough. Brian, do you have any metrics on tickets or merchandise sales from the teams you're working with?
Yeah, not committed to memory. Recently one of the NHL teams had a offsite with their partners, and they stood up, and it was a team that we're in our first year with, and they shared a lot of those metrics with their partners, and talked about ticket sales being up a certain percent, merchandise being up a certain percent. Look, I think part of that has to do with just the visibility of broadcast. It also helps they won the Stanley Cup last year. So, I think, from the partners we talk about, the increased visibility means, more engagement, more ticket sales, more merchandise, more sports betting. They benefit from sports betting as well financially, as well as, engagement as well. So I think, more and more we'll be finding different ways to create additional revenue streams based on the fact that more people can watch their games.
Okay. Now, has doing this required any sort of new technology investment at your stations in terms of maybe studios for the shoulder programming we discussed, or any master control gear to deal with targeted ad insertion across these zones, or is there an infrastructure cost here for stations? I'll throw it to you, Pat.
Yeah, so we're fortunate. We have a couple of sports production companies that have studios, that have trucks. So for us, the investment's minimal. I think we've added some, ad insertion equipment, but for the most part, it's really not a meaningful number.
Okay. Brian, how about for Scripps?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a lot of these markets, we're doing all the production of the games. We typically hire a crewing company, we'll, rent a truck, but also, there's pre-post intermission, studio shows at home. They're typically in the arena, so there's a cost to sort of build staging or a performance area inside the arena. And then when the teams are on the road, we still, you typically don't travel, your studio team for post and intermission. So we've built studios in Miami inside of our TV station. We've built a studio here in Las Vegas. We've built a studio at the practice facility. So, and then, for our national deals with NWSL, WNBA, we built a big sports studio in Atlanta. And then all of that, no matter where, it all goes through master control in Atlanta. So even Vegas and Miami, we're running it through master control, and then it goes out and it's sent back to the individual market through Atlanta. So we've made quite an investment in the infrastructure.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there are maybe different models too, a little bit here, where, I mean, LTN isn't in the business of doing, rolling big trucks to venues and doing, a baseball game. We do a lot of live production, but we don't necessarily do that specific, NHL, MLB, NBA games. We've built out a service in cases where you don't have your own sports production teams, like the folks in Pat's organization or at Scripps, where we can where we directly integrate with sort of the studio, the pre-post studio on site, and we're online with the, on a cord line with the trucks, and we can sort of be an outsourced master control, but we're more than just sort of throwing a few people at it. That's not what our business model really is. That's not really what it's all about. Of course, we have production operators and specialists. It's about leveraging technology. I talked earlier about sort of how do you do that for ads, right? How do you make a smart ad profile, ad signaling to do streaming versus over the air versus linear, et cetera. What we're also seeing is, while you may be doing the game one time, from the stadium or what have you, how do you customize and how do you enrich that? Maybe you do want a slightly different version of the same Braves game for Savannah versus Columbus, Georgia versus Atlanta, right? To use your example. Maybe there's just maybe the package is different. Maybe the graphics are different. Maybe you need a Spanish language announcer in certain markets where there's an audience for that. How do you integrate that in? That's not traditionally master control or even something that's done at the truck. It's really hard to do there. But if you can bring that content, those games, into a network, and you can throw technology and automation at it, you can drive an even closer relationship with the viewer. So it feels like when I'm watching that game, whether it's on a streaming platform or over the air, it feels like it's for me, in my audience, in my market, or in my language, or targeted at, sort of my age bracket, however you want to sort of slice and dice. That's where we tend to invest a lot of our technology and our focus.
Thanks. Scott, you had a unique situation in Portland on how you got the Trailblazer games up on your stick there. Can you talk about what you did with your digital multicast channel?
Yeah, I don't, sometimes you definitely run into some things in broadcast land that you don't run into when you're just distributing to a cable company. So our primary station in Portland, KUMP, is a former Univision affiliate, and it kind of sits out in the east. And we run a repeater in the DMA, which, for those familiar, isn't always the strongest signal. So we probably, I forget who made the point that some of these deals were popping up like right before the season, but Portland was probably done 6 weeks before their first game. So we made a decision to open up a 1080i slot on our multicast of our ABC affiliate in Portland to make sure that we had the best quality feed available for people who are over the air, predominantly viewers, because we weren't actually launching on the primary stick until January 1st. So it was one of those definite unique broadcast experiences. And now, of course, we're tracking ratings for both that feed and the one out in the east, and it's more fun. We have to add them together, but it's again like something you don't expect to run into when you only have 6 weeks to plan.
Gotcha. Frank, something that was in the news recently was ESPN stepping back from its MLB deal and not renewing their rights deal. What sort of, and we do see all these packages of deals flying around now from the local clubs. What sort of opportunity do you think that maybe represents for local stations?
I'm not sure what it means for local stations. I know our folks at Fox Sports have been having conversations. I'm sure others have as well. So I'm not sure how that will trickle down. But I do think it's symptomatic, if not representative of what, there are certain situations where it just doesn't make sense, so you got to make a move. I mean, I remember in our own company the last year of that we had of Thursday night football. It just didn't make sense to still keep it if the big deal was going to be, Sunday. So Amazon started a year early. So things like that are going to happen, I believe. Locally, I couldn't tell you how that's going to affect us.
there's a lot of 10-game packages that have been signed across all the groups. I see the press releases at my inbox every couple of days. Well, what do you see as the long-term, and sometimes it's being done in a partnership with an existing RSN, FanDuel markets where they're up, and maybe it's a simulcast. What do you think about, what's the rationale for that long-term? I mean, obviously, right now, it's new programming for your call letter there, but does that make sense in the long term?
Yeah, so I think they're great deals. I mean, when you think about it, it's sort of, in some ways, lower risk, lower reward, but it actually is quite rewarding because you learn a lot from an audience perspective and from an ad sales perspective. And for the teams, it's the added reach thing we've been talking about for the whole panel. It's a really big deal. But, from a numbers perspective, we've now run a fair number of games that are simulcast, and, the broadcast numbers are significantly, it varied significantly, I mean, from here to here, right? So from plus 15 to 5x in terms of, broadcast over delivery on the RSN. So I think it's a toe in the water. I think, we'll see what happens next year. There may be more than 10 games available, depending on what happens. But all in all, I think it's a very good situation. We've done a lot of them.
Thanks, Pat, by the way, for the Twins. We appreciate that. Thank you.
You're the man.
Scott, what do you think about some of these, 5, 10-game packages?
I think we're kind of, I don't know if wait and see is the right approach. I think a lot of our primary markets don't overlap with the RSNs, which I think we only had 6 overlap with, say, FanDuel's primary. And so certainly where you have a primary, DMA for a team, it's probably a much better opportunity I mean, not everybody is, the Braves are the super station team, right? So they have fandom in a lot of different DMAs. So we look at them as they come across, and a lot of it is just dictated by what you happen to have from an affiliation standpoint. I mean, if we're preempting Fox and we're in an outer market, we have to really weigh limited preemptions against how much revenue we're preempting. But in other cases, we may have an independent, and it makes all the sense in the world to get live sports up in there. And there are certainly, again, teams that sort of transcend their local DMAs, which I think are infinitely more attractive when you start getting to the outer reaches of their footprint. So we are case by case. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Case by case.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to ask one last question to Brian. I know you said it's second inning, perhaps, in this game. What do you see as the potential impact on retrans negotiations for stations down the road in terms of getting paid fairly for your station's value?
Is anybody going to really answer that question?
That's why I saved it for the end. If I didn't get much, it didn't cost me much.
Look, I think
You're up next, Scott.
these are becoming some of the most watched programs and watched stations in the markets, the one that have the local rights. And so, I think they certainly have value. We believe they have value. We're paying a license fee to acquire rights. And, I think it's our expectation that just like, the last, structure with the RSNs, their structure was largely driven off of distribution fees. I think our models are primarily driven off of advertising models, but doesn't mean we go and give away our programming, for free. And so we're paying a fair amount, and a MVPD would certainly benefit from having these stations, knowing the significant viewership that's happening, and it's happening live. And so I think there's a fair market value to be negotiated.
Okay, fair enough. Anything else?
No, I would just agree with what Brian said. I mean, I think if an independent television station shows up with 150 hours of a local NBA team, or 300 hours of baseball, whatever it is, that's something that's worth paying for, because that's the highest rated stuff in the market outside of NFL, right? So it makes sense to me.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, we've run over our time, but I really appreciate all my panelists' attention and time in the prep calls. I think we had a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it.